Hi ladies and gentlemen, this is our first section of our government online video lectures. This is chapter 1, section 1, government and the state. So a couple things in this section that we will cover: defining government and the basic powers every government holds, the 4 defining characteristics of a state, 4 theories that attempt to explain the origin of the state, and understanding the purpose of government in the U.S. and in other countries. Okay, so key terms that you should know for this section. Government is the institution through which society makes and enforces our public policies. That is just a very general, vague term for government. Public policies are all the things that the government decides to do. So that is a lot of things. The laws that we abide by, etc. Those are all public policy. Legislative power, that is the power of the government to make laws. The executive power is the power to enforce and administer the laws, and the judicial power is the power to interpret the laws. You can remember legislative power like L, make the laws, L. Executive power E, enforce the laws, and judicial power J, judge or interpret the laws. Dictatorship is a government in which all the power rests in one person or within a small group of people. A democracy is a government in which the power rests in the people themselves, and we will talk about how the people hold that power and who they give it to. A state is a body of people living in a defined territory with a government that can make and enforce a law without the consent of a higher authority. This is where a lot of people get confused, because we call in the United States, like we have the state of Missouri or Illinois or California. But when we learn what the actual definition of a state is, we find out that maybe we have termed those wrong, because we know that in the state of Missouri, we still have to answer to the government of the United States, the federal government. So we do have to abide by the consent of a higher authority. Sovereign means to have supreme and absolute power within the territory, and divine right is the idea that a government has gained their authority from God or a divine supernatural being. So government is the institution that allows societies to make rules, laws, enforce them, and provide for the general well-being of the people. Every government has 3 basic types of power. So back to our key terms: legislative, making the laws; executive, enforcing those laws; and judicial, interpreting what those laws mean. In a dictatorship, all the power is held by one person or a small group of people, compared to in a democracy where the people themselves hold the power and they vote others into authority in several cases. We will get more into both of these as we move forward. The U.S. government gives executive power to the president, who we elect. Legislative power to Congress. They are the ones who make our laws. We elect them and they vote onto what laws we carry out. And then the judicial power is our Supreme Court that decides how to interpret those different laws and actions. A state is the main unit of government in our world. Okay, so like I said, a state is not like we know, like Missouri or Illinois. A state is a sovereign country, a country that makes its own decisions, has its own territory, and enforces their own laws. So in our world, there are over 200 sovereign states, varying in how large they are, how many people live in them, and what kind of power that they hold. Okay, a state is not strictly the same as a nation, which refers to a large group of people, sometimes of the same ethnicity or culture. or a country, which refers to a particular region. We'll talk about how sometimes these terms can kind of differ. Every state has 4 basic characteristics, again, like we've talked about. They have a population, so a number of people that live there, territory, sovereignty, which means that they make their own decisions, and there is no one that makes decisions for them, no higher government that they answer to, and they have their own functioning government. So moving on, every state has a population. That just means that people live there, whether they are all of the same type of people or different. China, for example, has a very large population. Also, a state must have a territory or land with boundaries. Every state has sovereignty. That means they make their own decisions regarding their government and do not refer to a higher government above them. And they have their own political organization to make and enforce these policies. Okay, so there have been different ideas that have developed over time to explain how a state becomes a state. So we'll talk about the force theory, the evolutionary theory, divine right, and social contract theories. The force theory is the idea that a particular group or sometimes an individual claim control over an area and force others living there to submit to them. Okay, so the state then becomes sovereign, and those that are in control, that have come into control by force, form the government there. So this theory, you can kind of think of the toughest guy or the bully is the one that wins. The one that forces others to submit to them is the one that stays in control. The evolutionary theory is the idea that populations grow out of families or a specific group of people living in one area for a long period of time, and over time the heads of those families become the decision makers, and they become the ones that are controlling the government. So once they claim it as their own, they're making their own decisions, they're not answering to a higher authority, and they are becoming a sovereign state. The divine right theory is that the people in power of that state were given their power by a divine authority or by God. They would believe that God created that state, therefore it answers to no other higher power, and that God or that divine entity, whatever they believe in, also chose who the ruler was of that government. And because of that, the people must obey that person. The social contract theory. This was developed by philosophers in the Enlightenment era like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and had a lot of influence on our government here in the United States. This theory is that the people choose to give their state only enough power to promote the well-being for everyone. So the state itself doesn't hold any power unless the people decide to give it to them, or to give it to their government leaders. And those government leaders are in control only for the purpose of providing the general good of the people. Okay, so in general, the people voluntarily give power to the government or to the state in exchange for the state providing safety and promoting the well-being of the people. Continuing with the social contract theory, if the people have given the power to the state, they can also take it away. If that state is unjust, their power will be taken away from them and given to somebody else. Okay, so what should be the purpose of government? And this will be something that hopefully you will be making opinions about throughout the year. In theory, government should be providing for the domestic tranquility, which means peace at home, keeping us safe, law enforcement and order, also providing for the country's defense in case of attack. General welfare of the people by providing things like public education, blessings of liberty by guaranteeing individuals' rights and liberties, such as our First Amendment rights and liberties. But of course, there are restrictions. You are guaranteed these rights as long as you are not harming others in the process. So I want you to continue thinking about what you believe the purpose of government should be. This was a shortened version of our first lecture, section 1 from chapter 1. And please come see me if you have any questions about what you saw on here.